The Family Advocacy Center is a city program that helps strengthen families and offers support for those in crisis. Here to talk about a unique partnership with EMPACT-SPC are Libby Bisa and Jill McMahon. Welcome to you both. September is Teenage Suicide Prevention Month, and we just had a guest on talking about that. And I didn't realize that we had programs in the city to help people that families been involved in suicide. So could you tell me what you offer and what you do?
Well, the Family Advocacy Center supports families for victims of violent crime, but we also have a program where we're able to provide counseling for secondary victims of homicide, those who are left behind who really struggle and need support and assistance. So we also have on site a partnership with EMPACT-SPC, and so that's how we are connected with Jill and what she does.
And Jill, what do you do?
I do work with Impact Suicide Prevention Center. I am a prevention specialist. What I do specifically is I work with friends and family members that are left behind after someone dies by suicide. They're known as survivors of suicide. Impact itself is a huge behavioral health agency. We have over 300 employees. We offer crisis services. We have a mobile team. We have trauma healing, family services, children's services. But what I do specifically is suicide prevention and suicide postvention. I'm very passionate about working with families that have lost someone to suicide because that grief is very different and very complicated.
I just can't imagine.
Right.
I'm sure there's guilt, you should have had some indication, there should have been something you could have done to prevent it in some form, and how you deal with that in the aftermath, I applaud you. I just don't know how you can work through some of those issues.
You bring up a really interesting point. What makes this grief so different is that there is a lot of guilt associated that may not be associated with cancer, that may not be associated with a heart attack or a car accident necessarily. And there's also some social stigma. There's some shame involved. So when you add kind of, what society's beliefs may be about suicide and your own personal guilt, it's really hard to feel like people understand. And so you tend to isolate yourself and feel like you're in this all alone.
I think we need to talk about it more. I think
agree.
it needs to have the awareness really raised to a new level, whether it's schools, parents groups, or whatever. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. If I could, wave my magic wand, people wouldn't, suicide wouldn't be the S word anymore. I encourage people to use the word suicide. We weren't raised in a society that spoke about suicide, certainly not when I was a child. My children and their friends rarely. The more we talk about it, the more people can understand it, the more people will look for signs of depression and realize that it's a real thing. Suicide to me is a disease. It's a disease of the brain in the same way that cancer is a disease of the body. So I wish we could get schools to not be so afraid, and after they lose somebody to suicide or after there's an attempt, to bring it up with their administration, bring it up with their staff, teach coping skills to the kids so that they're not so afraid to approach an adult when they're having some of these feelings.
I was amazed at how many medications can trigger it. Mm-hmm. Especially, again, going back to teenagers, but I mean, same thing can happen to adults.
Absolutely.
Whether it's acne or it's the stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Chantix.
Yep.
Yeah.
Spice.
There we go.
Which is everywhere.
Everywhere, and I just think that we need to have more awareness and teach parents and teachers the symptoms and then what to do. So, but how do they contact the center to get help?
You can call 602-534-2120, and victim advocates can help speak to you, resource out, connect you with all of the services that are out there. And as Jill will speak to, the state in general has the highest level of services in the country. It's really pretty phenomenal, the things that are out there to serve people who are going through either the aftermath of a suicide or dealing with somebody who is suicidal.
And nobody knows.
And nobody knows.
And nobody knows. How do we publicize this more?
I think this is the beginning. You know, the ability to have people out there just talking about what suicide is and what it's really not. You know, that especially for teens, that it's really connected to depression, heavily connected to depression. So if you can really start honing in on the triggers and the things that come before, that maybe we can make a big difference.
When should they call you? When should they call for help? How does a parent, I mean, you know, teenagers, emotions, up, down, up, down. One day they're on the top of the world, the next day there's no hope.
I think the one thing that is the most concerning to me and that as a parent I'm always watching for is isolation. Anytime my kids want to be isolated, you know, more than just that up and down, then I'm more concerned that something's really going on. And that is a huge indicator that there's depression or that something's going on in their world. So watching for that isolation. And
I wholeheartedly agree with Libby. That would be the number one red flag that I would point out to most anybody. You know, to kind of piggyback on what Libby was saying earlier, Arizona is ranked 8th in the country for suicides. We've been in the top 10 for the last 20 years. It's a really high statistic, but it's not just teenagers that we're worried about in this state as well.
Exactly.
White men over the age of
Right.
65 are at the greatest risk of anything, but depression has everything to do with that. 80 to 90% of people, teens through adults, that die by suicide have suffered from some type of depression or bipolar, oftentimes undiagnosed. So looking for isolation, that's always the number one thing for me. You know, if all of a sudden you're not going to bunco night anymore, you're not going to girls' night out, the kids don't want to go to the football games, they're not texting, they're not responding to phone calls, and you know that's really out of characteristic for them.
Very much.
Absolutely, right? I mean, that would,
Yeah.
as a parent, you'd be like, what?
Ooh, that'd be a red flag.
Right? But if you couple with that previous losses in your life, that could be moving schools, that could be losing a job, moving homes, losing a pet, losing a friend. Physical ailment is a big one as well. You know, when you have a chronic back pain and you've just lost your job and, you know, you
Right.
suffer from depression, red flag, red flag, red flag. So I say call with any concerns. It's never a bad idea to inquire.
No charge for a call, right?
no charge for a call, and the hotline is a 24/7 line, the suicide prevention hotline.
It is. It is.
And you can get help.
Anytime.
Doesn't 24 hours a day, no cost. So I just want to thank both of you for coming on and talking about this topic. I applaud what you do. I look forward to working with you to continue to make people aware of the services that are out there and to help really address the problem. Arizona does not want to be in the top 10 for this. There's a lot of things we could attain, but not this subject. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.